Welcome to this class where we are going to start with reading a poem written by Robert Browning, My Last Duchess. Now, before we begin the reading of the actual poem, let's learn a little about the poet. Robert Browning was born on May 7th, 1812, in a household where every influence favored the nurturing of the poetic spirit. His father had a rich collection of rare books, and his mother was a woman of deep religious convictions. And when they discovered that their son had the makings of a poet, they encouraged him. He came under the influence of Byron in the beginning and then of Shelley, and under the influence of the latter, he discovered that poetry could have color, radiance, passion, and melody. Browning was a major Victorian poet and a contemporary of Tennyson. He is known for his intellectual vigor and his psychological studies of human nature. Browning grew up literally in an environment of arts. Educated mostly at home, he was well versed in arts and their appreciation. Browning and his wife Elizabeth Barrett, a poetess herself, lived for the most part in Italy at Pisa, Florence, and Rome until her death in 1861. Perhaps this personal experience, recorded in their letters and in some of his poems, say for example, One Word More or By the Fireside, made him one of the greatest love poets of the century. Browning writes, "Take away love, and our earth is a tomb." Their letter reveal a rare intellectual and spiritual kinship, an inviolable and intense love, and a wonderful critical penetration. Though he was a prolific writer, and though his poems had appeared regularly since the early beginning in 1833, recognition came to him late. He had to wait till 1868-69 before he could find a large, though elite, following which admired him more for his philosophy and his optimism than for his poetic qualities. He died at Venice in 1889. Browning's interest is not in decorating, but in revealing the truth he has discovered. His interest is in the individual self as it reveals itself in its encounter with the circumstances. In his poems, everything, words, cadence, and all other formal elements, serve one single purpose: to show the individual being shaped by the situation and in the process finding himself or showing himself. Therefore, his poems are to be read as records of those dramatic moments when the soul declares itself. Each poem, thus, is a record of an individual's encounter with an ancient in the development of his soul. And since he alone knows what is going on in his soul at that particular moment, he is himself made to reveal it, and hence the form into which the poems are cast is invariable, dramatic, and lyrical. Each poem is a soliloquy where the character speaks out either to himself or to an audience, but never interrupted in his inspired utterance. Now, that was about the poet. Now, let's read an introduction to the poem itself. My Last Duchess was published in Dramatic Lyrics in late November 1842. In the collection of 1849, it was made one of the dramatic romances and lyrics, and in the rearrangement of the poems in 1863, it was put under dramatic romances. In the first publications, it was entitled In Italy, and it was in the 1849 edition that the present title, My Last Duchess, was given. My Last Duchess is a monologue spoken by an Italian duke of ancient lineage, a widower, to the confidential agent of a count whose daughter he proposes to make his second duchess. It is not clearly known if Browning based his poem on the life of any particular duke, but it has been suggested that the source of his story was the career of Alfonso II. last of the great Este family. This duke first married a young girl called Lucrezia, daughter of the Duke of Florence, who brought him a handsome dowry. Her life with him was never happy, and she died 3 years later under very suspicious circumstances. Soon after this, Alfonso began negotiations for the hand of Barbara, niece of the Count of Tyrol, whose capital was at the Innsbruck. The agent of the Count who concluded the negotiations was a native of Innsbruck. The reference of clause of Innsbruck at the end of the poem gives credence to this theory. It is said that Alfonso II was like Browning's Duke, cold, egotistical, extremely possessive, and a patron of the arts. It has also been suggested that My Last Duchess owes its original to Shakespeare's A Winter's Tale, with Leontis as the model for the Duke and Hermione for the Duchess. But jealousy is not the prime passion of Browning's Duke. It is a fierce possessiveness that makes him to look upon the Duchess as a piece of art. Browning has represented the Duchess as a pathetic, stifled figure, rendered incapable by circumstances of giving expression to her talents and feelings. It has been suggested this is based somewhat on the life that Elizabeth Barrett lived in Wimpole Street. Her talents and passions were stifled by the tyranny of her father. The poem tells the story of possessiveness and the consequent murder. Written in the form of a dramatic monologue, the speaker is an Italian duke of the Renaissance period. The listener is a messenger who has come with a marriage proposal. The reader is expected to a multifaceted examination of the act of murder. The Duke's possessive passion for collecting objects of beauty, his sense of refinement and aristocratic pride do not only contrast with his cruelty and material greed but also provide in an uncanny way the explanation for it. In a brief span of 56 lines, the characters of the Duke, his dead wife, and of the period are delineated very skillfully, at times with the help of parentheses, colloquial diction, and broken syntax. In the next lesson, we will be reading the poem and going into the explanation of its form for you. Thank you.